This is the story of 3 disturbing encounters with the same man. Let's not make it 4. I was 15 years old at the time and out to a weekend afternoon movie with my friend. We were really early, so we decided to take a look around a nearby toy store to kill some time before the previews began. I was strolling absent-mindedly down an aisle by myself, looking at toys I felt far too old for when I heard an odd whistle. If you've ever heard the iPhone notification chime, then you have an idea of the sound I heard. I thought nothing of it, maybe it was someone's phone, and moved through the aisles, eventually meeting back up with my friend. We walked around a bit more, talking and laughing, and I heard that whistle once again. Being preoccupied with my conversation more than anything, I still didn't pay it any mind. On our way out of the store, I heard the whistle for a third time, but much closer, practically right over my shoulder, and I whipped around mid-sentence. A man stood there, grinning from ear to ear in a strangely sinister way. The smile didn't fully reach his eyes. He was a bit on the small side, scraggly with long hair tied back in a low ponytail. He had on a tattered black t-shirt which hung loosely off his thin frame and a bulging black drawstring backpack. "Hi," he said, stretching his lips even wider around his contrastingly bright white teeth. As a teenage girl, I was no stranger to the attention of older men, but something about his persona and approach set me on edge. Still, I was taught to be polite. "Hi," I responded tentatively, taking a step backwards and away from his intense stare. "I've noticed you around the store and thought I could get your opinion on something." He unfurls a crumpled, stained copy of the toy store's weekly ad and pointedly stabs at the Barbie doll selection with his index finger. "See, I'm looking for the perfect doll for my niece and I just have no idea which one to pick. What do you think?" He looks up and smiles, but his eyes are dark pools of nothingness, devoid of any real interest. "This one is nice," I say, pointing to a doll at random, hardly looking at the ad. "Wow, thank you, I really appreciate that. Hey, has anyone ever told you how pretty you are? You must go to the gym often. What gym do you go to?" Taken aback by his abrupt stream of rehearsed-sounding pickup lines, I say thank you and force a laugh. I'm young, and so is my friend. Our inexperience and his strange approach keeps us frozen in place. His eyes bore only into mine, and his grin, wider still and deeply disconcerting, never fades from his face. "Hey, do you want to be friends? I'd like very much to be friends with you. You know what friends do? They take pictures together. Let's take a picture together since we're friends." He holds up a red flip phone with the front cover held together by a rubber band. He activates the front-facing camera, and before I can say anything, he leans into me, face uncomfortably close, and snaps the picture. He looks at it briefly, smiles, and pockets his phone. "There now, we're friends," he says matter-of-factly and turns his gaze back to me, appraisingly. Stupidly, in a horrified daze, I nod. "So where are you from? Where are you going after this? What do you like to do?" My friend puts her hand on my arm, and I suddenly break from my stupor. "We have to go. My dad's waiting," I say, and we turn to go. My last, but not final, glimpse of him is with his head cocked to the side and that wide smile spread across his face. His eyes now flicker with something I can only recall as amusement. We turn our backs, and as soon as we get far enough away, we run. Fast forward to a year and a half later. I'm in my junior year of high school, and on the early morning city bus heading to my first class of the day. The bus is packed, and I squeeze my way to the back, reaching out a hand to grab the pole as the bus brakes sharply. I hear a whistle close to my ear. When I hear it again, I adjust my earbuds in my ears. Why isn't that person answering their phone? A hand closes right above mine on the pole. It is too close, and our fingers brush, but the person holds their hand there almost intentionally. I move my hand and glance up and into the broad smile of the creepy man from the toy store. Cold chills shoot down my spine, and I grip the pole even harder until my knuckles turn white. He tilts his head, still smiling his toothy grin, and says, "Hi, friend." The bus is so jam-packed that there's nowhere else for me to go, so I turn my body as far away from him as possible, hoping that playing dumb would work in my favor and he would go away. He leans closer still and says, "Hi, do you remember me?" I shake my head no and lean as far away as I can in the tight space. He frowns and looks suddenly angry. "No, I know you. We met before, we're friends." I shake my head again, looking down, pretending to be engrossed in my music player. Maybe if he didn't get a full look at my face, he might think he had me confused with someone else. "No, I have your picture," he says, and reaches into his drawstring bag, pulling out his red flip phone held together by frayed rubber bands. All the while I'm thinking, If he sees me get off at the stop to my school, he'll know where I am every day and can find me easily, but if I get off at a random stop before my school, he could get off with me and I have nowhere else to go. He's still scrolling through his phone, and I'm imagining all the other girls' pictures he might have on there when he asks, "So what school do you go to?" I think about saying mind your own business, but remember his angry frown from before and give him the name of another school. It doesn't really make sense because this bus only goes past one high school and not the one I told him, but he nods at this and says, "Hold on, I have your picture somewhere here. We're friends." The bus pulls up to my high school and there's nothing else I can do but to get off. While he's still preoccupied with his phone, I lose myself in the crowd and run all the way to school. I'm shivering when I get to my first period classroom, and I can hear the blood rushing in my ears. I ask my boyfriend to take the bus with me every morning for the next few weeks, and I change up my route going to and from. But I don't see him again until 2 years later, and I'm a sophomore in college. I'm taking the bus home alone after a late night out with friends when I hear a weird whistle. Enough time has passed that I don't feel much alarm and exit the bus at my stop. It is completely dark out, and I'm one of 2 people who get off. Then from behind me I hear, "Hello there, do you remember me?" I turn around and it's him again. It's hard to make out his features in the dark, but I instantly remember the tone of his voice, recall the whistle, the tiled head, and the wide, toothy smile. I see what looks like a backpack strapped to the front of his chest. "No," I say, and start walking faster, heart racing, wondering how fast I can run in these flip-flops. I hear him picking up speed behind me and I dare to glance back. I glimpse him starting to run at me, his hands in his backpack, digging around for something that I don't want to know. He is angry now, smile gone, and he shouts at me, "So you want to be that way?" I start running and don't stop until I get home. So just over 10 years ago, I was fresh out of college and had moved back to my parents' house for the free rent food for 9 months or so before I was leaving the state for graduate school. Now my parents are super chill and gave me my own space in the house. But being a 22-year-old single guy and living at a house in the sticks, they had just recently moved about 40 miles south of a major Midwest city, is certainly not ideal. But I didn't have any other options, so I started looking for some work more to pass the time than to save up some money. Anyway, so summer turned to winter and I still hadn't found anything solid. But by then I desperately needed to spend more time out of my parents' house, so I took a part-time gig doing some light bookkeeping for a small business owner guy that my dad knew. I didn't really want to do it since it didn't pay much, was short-term, and wasn't even a real office setup, but again, since my parents lived in the middle of nowhere Midwest, think acres and acres of farms, I knew I had limited local opportunities to make some cash, and this guy was going to pay me under the table as well. About that same time, a friend of mine in the city said that if I just paid him $200 a month and helped clean up, he'd basically let me crash in his living room until I was ready to move out of state. That was all I needed to hear. I took the job. So my dad's friend's family had a construction-type business. They helped out with building stuff a little, but it was ultimately more focused on renting out a few bobcats and large augers they owned. Also other various drills and then odds and ends like generators and other low-level construction or farming equipment that someone in that area couldn't afford to purchase, but needed to use from time to time. This was a small mom-and-pop type thing where everyone knew everyone, and the office only opened on days that when someone was coming by, and was just generally a mutually beneficial situation for the business owners and the locals. Since I had minored in a business-adjacent area and my dad recommended me, they trusted me to go in there for about 15-20 hours a week and check and file the rental forms, make sure nobody missed a payment date if there was a payment plan in place, answer an email or two discussing prices and availability, etc. Super easy gig. The old building where I worked was about, I think, 90 years old, and at the top of this little hill and the downstairs used to be an old country bar until the 1970s when this family bought it cheap, cleared out the bar and fenced in the property to use its parking lot area to store all their rental equipment and gear. I could generally come and go as I pleased, work any hours I wanted to as long as the work got done. So if things were slow and there weren't any rentals for a couple days, I'd usually go in after 7 and stay until around midnight or 1. Since I knew I'd be alone and could listen to music loud and take my time and all that. The office where I worked was on the second floor of the building above the old bar and looked out onto the long driveway. From my seat I could easily see out the window and once or twice saw a family of deer or a raccoon scamper by, and I always glanced out when I saw movement since it was very noticeable. It was incredibly remote, very still and quiet. So if something unusual occurred or if something felt off, I definitely noticed it. One night during winter it had snowed a few inches and my dad told me to stay in because the roads were bad. But I had an old SUV and more than that just really wanted to get out of the house. So I went into work at about 8 p.m. and was going to stay until just after 1. I always left the gate open at the bottom of the hill, since believe me when I say that nobody ever showed up at night since we were literally in the middle of nowhere. I think the nearest occupied house was about 2 miles down the road, and to even turn onto our short road you had to only be coming to our specific. I always left the gate open at the bottom of the hill, since believe me when I say that nobody ever showed up at night since we were literally in the middle of nowhere. I think the nearest occupied house was about 2 miles down the road, and to even turn onto our short road you had to only be coming to our specific building and probably know it was there beforehand. It was a locals only type thing and very small, since the family had inherited a lot of money, we're pretty sure, and kind of did this rental thing on the side. Basically someone would never just get lost and end up at our building. So I'm jamming away to some Fall Out Boy, everyone makes mistakes when they're young, and having some coffee and kept glancing at the snow outside here and there. Since our one orangish streetlight reflected onto the ground at the gate and was causing the light to shine off the snow in a really cool, dare I say pretty way. At one point around midnight I went downstairs to the big bathroom to do my bathroom business, and then came back upstairs and got settled back into my work. I probably did about 5 minutes of work when I glanced outside and saw a huge imprint of something in the fresh snow just below the light. It seemed like it must have been a huge dog or substantial animal had just rolled around on the ground there on its back or something. Since I didn't notice it just 15 minutes before, it had to have happened while I was in the bathroom or maybe when my back was turned, since I would have seen that type of movement for sure. I shook it off and assumed a dog or maybe even a farm animal. This was common, was that type of area. Had gotten loose and maybe was attracted to the light or something. Who knows? At around 2 in the morning I was leaving, and as always got out of my car to lock the gate up, and to be honest I'd pretty much forgotten about the imprint in the snow. But when I looked down I was shocked to see that it wasn't just some disturbed snow, but it was undeniably the imprint of a human-made snow angel. If you don't know what a snow angel is, it's when kids lie on their back in the snow and push their arms and legs back and forth. So when they get up it looks like the outline of an angel. I used to do this when I was a kid, so I 100% knew for sure that's what this was. And it was deliberately made underneath the light post. But it wasn't from a kid, it was from a very large person, or at the very least a normal-sized adult wearing tons of layers of big winter clothing. I looked up and saw what I already knew, that whoever had made this snow angel could easily look up and have seen me through that window, so they must have waited for me to head downstairs to make this angel. Now I definitely would have seen or heard if someone drove up to our building, even if I was in the bathroom. So I knew someone had to have walked deep into the freezing cold and snow for a few miles, stopped in front of our building and then do a snow angel in the small amount of time I wasn't sitting in front of my desk window. I glanced around for tracks in the snow and saw that there was one set that led to the nearby woods to the right of the building, so it was clear the person didn't use the road, but instead came from the opposite side, which made me instantly uneasy, since that side was just trees and darkness for miles and miles. I was definitely a little freaked out now once I realized that someone had just been this close to me secretly in the middle of the woods. And I looked around but didn't see anything amiss at all and now just wanted to get the hell out of there. When I got back in my car and drove a few feet, I realized that my boss would be there in like 4 hours and might see the snow angel and assume I did it, since he probably assumed I kept the gate locked when I was there. It wouldn't have been that big of a deal at all, but I was young and felt like I might be made fun of by him if nothing else. So I opened the gate back up real quick, ran over and kicked the snow around so it hid the angel, locked it up again and went back to my car. Also, I should note this is what really happened at this moment. But I almost lied here and said something else since it seems fake. since I assumed the average person wouldn't get back out of their SUV and not just flee in their car because they'd be embarrassed about a snow angel. But at that time I was insecure and cared a lot about what others thought. So unfortunately, this is what I did. Also, I wasn't exactly fully terrified at this point, even though it was certainly unsettling. I just thought it was really weird and could have been an illegal hunter, even though hunting at night in the cold didn't make much sense. Either way, the imprint was made 2 hours earlier, and I assumed they were long gone. But that's when I heard it. When I was getting into my SUV, there was the loudest high-pitched laughing coming from the woods. It almost sounded like a fake laugh, like the Witch and Wizard of Oz or something. Like someone was doing it fake on purpose to show they weren't scared of me, or how I'd react at all once I knew they were there laughing at me on our property. It was close enough that I knew they could probably see me, but I couldn't see them at all since other than the street light I was under, there was no illumination. After a few seconds of laughing, they stopped. And then it was just silence everywhere except for my heart beating through my ears. Then the laughing started again, though louder this time, more like screaming and laughing combined. I sort of froze for just like 5 seconds, listening in a panic. Now I spent a lot of time in that area, and I know what coyotes and foxes sound like at night with their high-pitched screeches during mating season. So I can't completely logistically rule that out. But to me it honestly felt like it was an adult man trying to emulate a woman laughing, like someone was deliberately trying to make a fake scary shriek laugh in order to scare someone. Well, it fucking worked. After that 5 seconds, I immediately filled with adrenaline, got in my car and drove the hell away from there as fast I could without sliding off the road. Back at home, I was up all night trying to figure it out and told my parents the story when they woke up. After talking it out, we all decided it was one of two things. It was either my brain somehow convinced itself that the snow formation was angel-shaped, when it was really just caused by some animal, and then the snow tracks and laughing was just a coyote or red fox. Though I don't think that's what it was. What I truly believe, the second thing, which is that some local was out walking around for some reason and decided to mess with me. I didn't have any close friends left in that area that would do this, and if they did, they would certainly have brought it up to make fun of me for speeding away in terror. I found out later that nearest house was a super old couple, so I highly doubt that it was one of them, which means whomever it was went out in the woods in the night in the freezing cold just to mess with a stranger. I don't have any mental issues or a family history of them. Didn't do drugs, I drank socially at that time, but certainly didn't that night. I also don't believe in the paranormal, so I never once gave that a thought. In my heart, I know someone was out there. I worked there another 6 weeks or so and never had a single issue, though I knew where my boss kept his gun and I always made sure it was there when I started my shift, and I certainly always locked the gate from then on. Thinking about this experience that night, the part that freaked me out the most was that he had to have waited around for me to leave for about 2 hours just to do that laugh. He didn't know me. I could have been crazy and the type of person to get mad and try to find and attack him. Yet he didn't seem scared or to care while he tried to mess with me.